Rathlin, one of Derek Mahon's greatest poems. Just a brilliant poem. Can I sum it up in 10 seconds? It's about the connections between the past and the present. And it's about the idea that what happens in the past informs the present. And if we don't learn our lessons from the past, we are, to use a cliche, cursed to repeat the mistakes of the past. Okay? So, Rathlin Island, off the north coast of the northeast coast of Ireland, is the setting for this narrative poem. Remember, Mahon is a poet who tells stories, who evokes settings, who provokes the senses through his mastery of language. And characters also feature in his poetry. We met Lawrence Oates in Antarctica. We met the fanatic in As It Should Be. In After the Titanic, we met Bruce Ismay. In the Chinese restaurant in Port Rush, we met the proprietor of the restaurant. In this poem, the character of Swarler Bui features in the second half in a quite a moving and powerful observation. Now, again, we're on page 150 in our paper 2 notes book. What I want you to remember, use the notes book, use the space to make notes at the right hand side of the page here. And don't forget, much of what I'm going to say here is broken down in a bit more granular detail in the summaries that follow the poem. So it'll be worthwhile reading it. Okay. Now, this poem consists of 3 stanzas, and it has, not unusually for Mahon, time shifts. It begins with a very, very, very striking, deliberately engaging opening line. A long time since the last scream cut short. There's our first quote we're going to learn from that poem. We've got the sibilance of since last scream and short. We've got the we've got the onomatopoeia of scream. It's a very, very powerful word. And then there's a rhythm in the line. Let's just count the number of syllables in the line. A long time since the last scream cut short. So we've got 9 syllables. So he's writing in and around. There's a meter here, but he's writing in free verse, and he's not sticking to one particular metrical pattern. We know that what he's doing in the opening line, because we're informed students of English, is trying to create curiosity. The reader wants to know, what was the scream? Who was screaming? Why were they screaming? So this is Mahon as a narrative writer, much like Van Boland, a narrative writer who knows how to tell a story in an interesting way. The scream he's referring to are the screams of a massacre that took place on the island of Rathlin in the past. We'll get to that in a few moments. So he is in the present as he's writing the poem, and he's thinking about the past. A long time since the last scream cut short. Then an unnatural silence, and then a natural silence slowly broken by the sheer water, by the sporadic. So we can see that he is writing. There's a meter in these poems. In this poem. There's an iambic pentameter that he's sticking to in most of the lines. And it means that, if you don't know what that means, it simply means that there's approximately 10 syllabic beats, and the first beat is stressed. But you don't have to talk about that. You'll never have to write about that in an essay. What you want to be able to say is that the poem reads with such fluency and ease, and that's not by accident. That's a result of the poet's craft. That's a result of his ability to write lines within the meter or within the metrical structure, and that's what creates the fluency. So we have the really interesting juxtaposition of a unnatural silence and a natural silence. So what does that mean? Well, it means after the massacre, all those bodies were lying dead And that's an unnatural silence. These people should be up walking around, talking to each other. Children should be playing. But no, there was a massacre. So the silence is unnatural. But then time moved on and nature took over. And there were no people on the island. So the silence was the silence of the natural world where there were no people. So it's an image of the movement of time, the transience of life, the fact that everything is in flux, nothing stays the same. He then says, slowly broken by the sheer water, by the sporadic conversation of crickets, lovely alliteration in that line, the bleak reminder of a metaphysical wind. Now, this is hugely evocative. He is describing the island, the sounds of the island, the sounds of the bird life, the sounds of the fauna, the animal life on the island, the sounds of the wind. But he's also capturing this sense of Rathlin as a place that is a kind of melancholy reminder. Bleak, that word bleak is used to capture the sadness that the poet feels when he thinks about the past. And metaphysical, that's a really important word there. So metaphysical simply means of the mind, of the imagination. It means other things, but for the purposes in this poem, it means of the imagination. And what he's saying is, and I'm sure you've had this experience yourself. I as a student and a lover of history, I have this experience all the time. What he's saying is that you have, when you go and visit somewhere which was important historically, when you go and visit the site of an event that happened many years ago, or you go and visit a building that is 800, 1,000 years old, the imagination takes over and one thinks about what it must have been like back then. And what Mahon is doing in this opening stanza is describing a day that he went out to visit Rathlin Island. And that when he was going out to visit that place, it was bringing him in contact with the past. It was bringing him into contact with the cruelty of the past. Ages of this, he says, ages of nature, until the report of an outboard motor, so that's the engine of the boat that he's on, at the pier fractures the dream time, and we land as if we were the first visitors here. Nothing hugely difficult or important there. The second stanza is all about Mahon as a incredibly gifted aesthetic writer. Somebody who's able to use descriptive language to bring scenes to life. He describes the island as a sanctuary where amazed onieric species, look at the onomatopoeia, whistle and chatter, evacuating rock face and cliff top. So we have this image, it's an island which is a bird sanctuary, and we can see the birds. I love the verb evacuating, like they dive down off the cliffs when they go hunting. Cerulean distance, this idea of the blue sky and the blue sea mixed together. An oceanic haze. And the odd somnolent freighter. Now, somnolent means sleepy. So in the distance you can see the slow moving freighter across the North Sea, making its journey across the trade routes of the world. And we have this incredible vision of beauty and of the natural, of the quiet and the peace of the natural world. And then we get to the money of the poem. Because the poem it's good up to now, but this is where it becomes really interesting. And this is where you start to learn things. I would certainly learn, by the way, whistle and chatter. They're good examples of onomatopoeia. He appeals to the oral sense. But we have this striking juxtaposition. Bombs doze in the housing estates. And of course, this is Mahon referring to what was going on in the world across on the mainland of Northern Ireland as he's visiting this island. And what's going on is civic violence, the Troubles, which we know started in the late 60s and went on right up until the end of the 1990s, where people from the different communities in Northern Ireland were killing each other. And Mahon is aware of the fact that at the same time as, nature is in bloom and in beauty on the island, across the water, there's violence. But here he says they are true with history, custodians of. Now, I've marked a few things in yellow. Whistle chatter, I think, is important. Bombs those in the housing estates, that juxtaposition between, peace and violence, that awareness that both of those things exist in his world. That's all important. That opening line is a brilliant line. A long time since the last scream cut short. These are all interesting lines. But if you're going to learn a line from this poem, this is the line you're going to learn. This is the key metaphor. Custodians of a lone light, listen to the alliteration, lone light that repeats one simple statement to the turbulent sea. Now, what Mahon is doing there, he's playing with imagery. The imagery of a lighthouse. What does a lighthouse do? It warns shipping of danger. And when the shipping sees the light, it can avoid the danger. Mahon is talking about the island and the story of what happened on that island centuries before he arrives there. He's saying that island is like a lighthouse. And if we don't pay attention to the warning that is symbolized by that island, then we are likely in the turbulent sea of politics and of social change and of society, we are likely to hit the rocks. It's a brilliant metaphor. I'm going to say it really simply. If we don't look at the lessons of the past, as I said at the beginning of the video, we are cursed to repeat them. And Mahon is looking at the history of his place, and he knows that there were sectarian violence in this part of the world in the 16th and 17th centuries. And here he is in the 20th century, and sectarian or violence based on religious differences has returned to this home place. The third stanza begins with a repetition of a long time since, which opened the poem. A long time since the unspeakable violence, since Swarla Bui, powerless on the mainland, heard the screams of the Rathlin women. It's a brilliant piece of character description. Swarla Bui was a chieftain. He was in a conflict, and he sent his people, his women and his children, out to the island for safety. His enemies sailed out to the island and butchered those innocents. This is historical fact. The story is in your notes. You can read the detailed story. But what you've got to get here is that it's not about Swarla Bui and it's not about Rathlin. It's about what it feels like to be powerless. This guy was a warrior, but here he's powerless. He's impotent. He's listening to the screams, and I love the way Mahon connects the beginning and the end, giving the poem a circular structure. He's powerless to rescue those women. And this communicates something about the poet's feeling of impotence, of feeling of being powerless to stop the violence that is engulfing the society all around him as he writes the poem. Since Swarla Bui, powerless on the mainland, heard the screams of the Rathlin women, borne to him seconds after upon the wind. Only the cry of the shearwater, the sound of that seabird or marine bird, and the roar, another example of onomatopoeia, of the outboard motor disturbed the singular peace. Spray blind, we leave here the infancy of the race, unsure among the pitching surfaces, whether the future lies before us or behind. Now on the screen there, apologies, you have the three quotes that I think are core to your analysis of this poem. A lone light that repeats one simple statement to the turbulent sea. Swarla Bui, powerless on the mainland, heard the screams of the Rathlin women. And then those last three lines. What does he mean when he says we leave here the infancy of the race? He means that in order to understand who we are today, we have to understand that we are formed in our childhood. So the society that he inhabits in Northern Ireland today, a society which is divided along religious lines due to the plantations, and I won't go into the history because you don't need to know the history in detail. All you have to know is that there was division in the past. And that division in the past led to terrible violence, such as the violence that occurred on Rathlin Island. And when he talks about the pitching surfaces, it's a brilliant, again, use of figurative language. So that if you're ever on a boat, a small boat, pitching, the boat goes up and down with the movement of the sea. He's talking about history. He's talking about the way change is a natural part of our lives and our societies and how we function. And he's talking about how he's worried that we might be going back to what was a terrible, violent, sectarian time. And that's why he ends the poem with the line, unsure among the pitching surfaces whether the future lies before us or behind. Now, if you're studying Derek Mahon and you're answering a question on him, I am telling you now, whatever the wording of that question, you're going to be able to use those quotes. You're going to be able to use them to talk about his mastery over language, his imagination, his ability to, his observational ability, his understanding of the past and its relevance to the present, and how his work has a depth and complexity that rewards repeated reading. This is not a poem about a visit to an island. This is a poem about deep and meaningful things. The visit to the island is merely the vehicle he uses to explore his observations on those deep and meaningful themes.